If you have been enjoying Edinburgh Business Stories and you want to keep up to date with some of the new episodes we've got coming out every other week, then why not subscribe? The stories, the guests we have are absolutely incredible and we wouldn't want you to miss out. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Good to be here.
So just give our listeners some context. Who are you and what is your business?
Sure. My name is Michael Rolland. I'm managing director of a business called The Paint Shed. Paint Shed is a paint specialist retailer headquartered in Stirling, but we have 6 stores in Edinburgh and 21 stores across Scotland and Northern England.
Amazing. And so it's a business that's been going quite a while. So tell us the story.
Yeah. So it's a business that's certainly well known in Edinburgh. My family history in the painting industry sort of actually dates back to 1875, but not to bore you with all the details of that era. We had at least 2 generations that were actual painters and decorators. So my dad's grandfather and his great grandfather, and through that journey, post-war, my dad's dad and his brother were running the contracting business, and they purchased a wholesale business in Fife called Strathern Paint Company. So that was about 1954. And that wholesale business would supply ultimately paint shops across Scotland at that time. Fast forward into the 70s and 80s, the contracting business was here in Edinburgh, and the retail business wasn't, the wholesale and retail business wasn't really a big commercial arm. Contracting business very much the focus. And through that journey, offices moved, and there was a wee shop attached to the head office up in Gilmerton. And when that office moved out to near the airport, they needed to move the shop. So Dad moved the shop and just up the road to Blackford Avenue, and then rebranded that name from the Strathern Paint Company to The Paint Shed. And that was how The Paint Shed was born in 1992.
Very good. Actually, just on that, who came up with the name The Paint Shed?
Oh, I'll definitely give that honour to my father. Yeah, absolutely.
It does literally what it says on the tin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah. And it was one of those, even when we were coming up, I remember coming back from, I was working up in Aberdeen at the time for in my past life in the corporate recruitment world. And I used to come back on a Friday night from Aberdeen, drive down, and me, my now wife Sarah, Dad, and my stepmother Lisa, we used to have a Friday night curry club, and we used to sit down on a Friday night around 8 o'clock. By the time I was back down, and talk about what had been happening in the working week. And I remember the name getting thrown about. So this is only 10 years ago or so. But the question at the table that night was, right, Michael, what do you think we should call the Paint Shed's website? What name should we call it? And I said, I think you should call it thepaintshed.com. And clearly this was a debate that had been going on that I just walked into.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which one Dad or Lisa had been arguing over or debating over, but either way, it was settled that we would call the website thepaintshed.com after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yep.
Sometimes takes an outside view on things to give the obvious. Yeah.
So how did you then end up in paint? What was your journey there?
Yeah. So thinking about it, you've always been around it, to be honest. So I remember in primary school going with Dad at the weekends to ultimately inspect the painting contracting jobs that were going on. So, and they used to do large scale contracting roles. So I remember going to the Mound, Bank of Scotland one Saturday morning, and Dad used to go around basically checking on the individuals to make sure that they're adhering to the timescales. And so you're always around it. And I do remember coming out that it's quite a moment actually. I remember coming out the mound and the sound of all the fire alarms going off that morning. And you came out and there was 6 fire engines up at the mound, and so what's happened? He said, the guys have been using the steam strippers to get the wallpaper off, and they've set the fire alarms off. So that was probably my introduction to painting and decorating, because it still sits certainly within the memory. And then from there, ended up working in the stores post-school for a year or so. Went off to university, worked in the stores during holidays and when I was back home. So was very familiar with the operation. And at the time we were, there was 3 stores in Edinburgh, and one up in Stirling. I think there was something in Glasgow at the time. So maybe 4 or 5 stores. And that would be the introduction. Again, like everything in life, you think that's kind of it. And I went off into a graduate scheme with a business called Michael Page Group, and thought that would be the last of it, to be honest. And eventually, as with everything in life, things change, and there was a situation where an opportunity presented itself within the business that Dad and the other director at the time thought that I'd be the right fit for. So I joined the business in 2016 after about 8 years or so with Page.
So back when you were, in your school or after school days and that, did you get a job there because it was convenient or because you wanted to, or what was the drive?
Probably pocket money. Have you call it pocket money?
Yeah. But was it, was it, why not get a job somewhere else? Was it just...
Yeah, no, I think there was definitely a level of interest. I knew some of the individuals, certainly the flexibility of, with university and holidays and everything like that. So you could schedule that in quite easily when you were back. Probably convenience is probably the honest answer.
I just ask because normally family businesses, you end up getting roped in and then and you're working for, a pound a day.
It wasn't a situation where it's prescribed that that's what you're doing, but it also wasn't a situation where it was, I've set this up and then you go. It was probably somewhere in between, which is right, well, this could actually be quite handy. And, you're at that age where you don't really know what's the difference between right and wrong anyway.
True. And so you then come in 2016, you say?
Yeah.
Stores at this point, we've got, 4 or 5 stores, did you say?
Yeah.
But there's no website at this point, is
Oh,
there?
no, sorry. So in 2016, it must have been, about 8 stores.
8 stores, right.
And there was a website, called thepaintshed.com,
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so then, because obviously you've taken a bunch of skills and experience from your days in recruitment in as well. So how did, what are some of those things that you took in that helped you?
So it was a situation where you one of the perks of coming from that world is you spend a lot of time ultimately meeting businesses, understanding their needs and what skill sets were working, what weren't, and ultimately what businesses were working and whatnot. And in particular, family businesses where you have multi-generations in businesses trying to work out where they sit within that organizational structure, what new skills needs to come in. So all that knowledge, I suppose, was quite handy because we were in a situation where, we're 8 stores turning over circa, 4 million or something. And we didn't really, there wasn't really sort of support services within the business as in, departments. So it was an opportunity to try and, what's the plan for the business? What's the growth strategy? And Dad and I were pretty united in terms of what we were wanting to try and do. And therefore, what skills were going to try and help us do that. And we did that in a quite a pragmatic way. It wasn't a situation where you went out to market, suddenly created, giant department heads and organizational structures, and then off you went. It was more about putting the right people in the right place when the business needed it. And as a starting point, the stores were almost like that. So as much as we're a retail arm, one of the things that we do really well is it all starts with hopefully the the manager as you come into the store. So that first interaction is friendly, helpful, individual. And in the paint industry and certainly trade, that historically has always been the challenge. There's always been some grumpy individual in the back of some dirty industrial unit. But we're very much the opposite of that, and really trying to break down all those barriers that are within the industry. So in terms of finding the right individuals to do that, it was quite easy to make those changes where necessary, and then bring in individuals that were going to do that. And those are almost, I call them, our stores are our sales force. We don't really have people on the road sort of knocking doors, but our sales force are individuals that if you come in, you should have a very good service, and you should tell somebody else about it, because it was very much better than what you would have experienced in a large shed or a trade unit somewhere that you'd have to Google to find. And that was definitely a bit of a game changer for us, of being able to get ultimately now 21 stores with 21 individuals that replicate that for any new or existing customer that comes in. And then it was just about building, skill sets around that. And the e-commerce function was certainly an important part of that.
And can I just ask as well, you and your dad got your heads together when you're kind of in there as well. Now, it's obviously, it goes on a fairly kind of impressive growth rate over the next number of years. Did you, in terms of the planning and the strategy, how formal was that between you and your dad? Did you kind of sit down and you have a proper board meeting and map it all out, or was it a little bit?
Yeah, so similar to the hiring, which was as of when the business kind of needed it. So, I definitely, since I was coming from that world, it'd be very easy to just hire a bunch of people and off you go. But we had to do that in a practical and logical format. So definitely the number of stores, geographical locations, revenue channels, all that stuff was quite easy to come to in terms of a decision. But the bits that to get the governance around it and process around it, so that everyone who was coming into the business and existing would understand, that needed a bit more thought about it. So, one of the things that we did relatively early on was had one or two board advisors that came on and helped us with that. And that was definitely a huge help. It was an individual that helped us that was part of QuickFit and their journey. And he was particularly helpful in helping us kind of carve that out and take us on, the next stage.
Nice.
At what point did you stop doing the contracting? Was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, I think that world had changed massively. And, Dad, to his credit, had been able to identify that the retail operation for all the work that you do, at the end of the day, well, where does the profit end up? And I think he would quite happily say that a light bulb moment of, I think there was 2 trading businesses at one point, and huge amount, you're spending 90% of your time on the contracting side, and actually it's making the same amount of money as the small retail business. So there was a pivot, and quite an important pivot, that has allowed that foundation to be there. And ultimately that was able to be phased out, and the focus became the retail business.
Because that's like hundreds, or not quite hundreds, but 100 years of legacy in terms of applying the paint to then the bold switch to say, actually, we're onto something here. And I think that's quite a...
Yeah, and I think that's the fascination with family businesses as well. There's legacy to look after, but at the same time, and that's the bit that I think is difficult to communicate all the time, which is, at the end of the day, it's still a trading business, and businesses are vulnerable every day to variation and variables that occur, it's a difficult decision. But if you do need to make the decision of pivoting, regardless of legacy, then that's a really very credible and very honourable thing to do.
Yeah. So when you came in 2016, then what was the feeling for you, having seen this business be built, being in recruitment? What was do you remember the moment where you were like, all right, I'm going to do that. Like, I'm going to be part of this.
Yeah. I remember walking down Queen Street whilst I was working my notice, and I was in my suit and my brogues, and I was walking past our House Street branch, and there was a pallet of paint sitting outside, and there was commotion going on. Occasionally, certainly in the new town, if there's a van that's maybe knocked over a tin, you can sometimes see the paint trail the van down the cobbles. And anyway, I was on the phone. I was walking back up to George Street where the offices were, my old employer, and I remember looking over thinking, well, I'm definitely going to a different world again, and I better ditch the suit pretty quickly. Yeah. So that was definitely a moment.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, that just shows you that in any change, there's going to be a little bit of fear, and even in a business that you ultimately have some sort of ownership in. You still have to go in and earn the right, and regardless of where you sit in that hierarchy, at the end of the day, our business we sell paint, but it's a people business, and certainly that's a line that our new owners would champion as well, which is if you don't have the kind of buy-in from the individuals, you're going to struggle. So I would like to think that we have everyone in the organisation has a pretty mutual respect, but in particular the individuals that are in the stores, they're there 7 a.m. till 5 p.m. And they do a hard graft, and they're the ones that are ultimately the people driving the business.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, you obviously just introduced the idea of the new owners as well. So do you want to almost kind of give us a summary of you coming into almost the sale of the business, and you tell some of the moments in that journey as well, please?
So, as I say, joined in 2016. We devised this ultimately growth plan that involved several new stores, any relocations that's necessary, heavy investment in our digital platform, and getting the right individuals around the table, getting some governance, etc. And off we went. And we were always, it's a business that generated cash, and therefore we didn't necessarily need to borrow any money. It's something that we were passionate about maintaining. And 3 years later, we had gone from 4 million to best part of just shy of 9. And within retail, you constantly need to grow to ultimately pay for things and do everything that you're trying to do, especially if you're not wanting to borrow any money. And there was definitely a moment as we were approaching the end of 2019 where the next phase would have required more investment into digital. And that presented itself where, okay, well, what we're going to do? And when people sell businesses, it's always, you always get asked the question of, well, was that always the plan? Well, no is the answer to that. And it's at different points you have to take reflection on what's right. And in 2019, I think, got to the point where we were open to the idea of some form of help along the way or investment, which is how we got to the point of taking investment from BGF, so British Growth Fund. So BGF invested in the business in May 2020. And we made that decision in the January, February of that year, that was the way it was going to go. And we were actually kind of 2 months into it, and then COVID occurred. So COVID was late March, and fair play to BGF. So they were very supportive through that period, even though all the retail shops were closed and there was no revenue coming in on that front. But we had again, I suppose, pivoted where the shops might have been closed, but the UK population were trying to buy paint.
Yeah.
And there was only certain avenues that were able to facilitate that. And thankfully for us, we had ultimately reinvested in the online platform. So we had actually built a brand new website in 2019. So we re-platformed our site and had it in a place where actually we were able to service some of that demand. So for the best part of 3 months in that middle of COVID in the summer of 2020, we completed on the BGF investment, and we ultimately operated an online business for 3 to 4 months until everything settled down. And fast forward 3 years from there, we continued to open stores. We continued to hire talented individuals at different levels. BGF definitely played a part in that in terms of our sort of credibility in the market. As a result of all that, there was definitely a lot of anticipation of what Paint Shed would do next. And as a result of that, we're very fortunate to get into discussions with brewers, and through those conversations we realised that these individuals would definitely be the right fit for us as a business when that time is right. And albeit it came slightly earlier for all of us, we had decided that this was the right time and the right situation to ultimately sell the ownership of the business.
Yeah. And Brewers isn't necessarily a name that I would have recognised, but that's because they operated south of the border, so to speak. And so you guys seem like a nice geographical fit for them.
Yeah, I mean, really perfect geographical fit. I mean, we're all the way down to Berwick upon Tweed. They're annex, so it really covers that. And out with the geographical side, and there's certainly other efficiencies and symmetries rather that we've seen together. But at the end of the day, they're very similar individuals and similar values and beliefs to what we have, which is it is family owned and truly family owned in the sense of, they're very clear that ultimately their goal is to be around here for the next 100 years. And in fact, the guys are just about to celebrate their 120 years this year. And then the belief that the individuals in the stores and the managers in these stores are the face of the business. Those are the individuals that customers want to come and see. And it's about creating an environment where these individuals want to thrive and want to ultimately sell paint. And it's our jobs to try and make that happen in the easiest way and a sustainable way for the future. So that symmetry was enough for us to think, right, well, this would be the right thing, and whether or not, and we need to decide if this is the right time.
Mm-hmm. And now I've got 3 linked questions here. One is it's just a geeky question around store location. How do you find the right store, as in the right location for a store to be placed, or would that be giving away some secrets?
No, that's topical conversation, that's for sure. It's in our industry. There's lots of legacy. And therefore the people that make the paint, it's important that they have the right distribution in the right locations. For the customer, just like in any retail operation, it's about value and options. So for us, it's very simple as, what location do we think that we can add value to for the customer? And that might be, we just opened in Kilmarnock, for example. Mm-hmm. You would think of the Ayrshire coast and think, oh, why would you open in Kilmarnock? Why wouldn't you open somewhere else, maybe Ayr? Well, Kilmarnock, there was no trade decorating centres there of any notable form. And the current paint supplier in there was only really distributing a couple of brands. So we look at that and go, well, I think we can do something different here. And as long as we can make it, get the right property with the right commercial terms, then it's a bit of a no-brainer, because once you get that bit, the next bit goes back to the people, which is what individual's going to lead it.
Yeah.
So we're very passionate about finding locations where we feel the customer ultimately deserves a better service, and trying to deliver that. And I think we've delivered that in some, Aberdeen's a great example, actually. So we opened in Aberdeen in 2021. Aberdeen, living there, a university and working, I'd always say it was 10 years behind Edinburgh, to be honest. And that's certainly true that, for example, the bypass that they opened was, relatively new. The city was probably needing it for the best part of 20 or 30 years. But anyway, but we opened this store in West Hill, and it's a city that didn't have, if you can believe it, didn't have a paint merchant that sold multiple paint brands. It was all centred around historic trade centres down by the port and the harbour. So, an absolute nightmare for individuals to get to. And the nice story about this is the individual that runs our store was an individual who used to run one of the decorating centres not far from where I used to live at university. So it's a shop I used to actually go into every now and then because it was at the bottom of my street. And this guy was probably serving me. And you fast forward again, 15, 20 years, and you think, God, how did that happen? But the chap that's joined us, who'd been running the business for 20 years, joined us, and and he's doing an amazing job. And that's the really fulfilling bit, is seeing individuals, in my view, kind of transforming, whether it's somebody from out the industry who comes in and thinks that we do things well or nicely, or individuals that have been in the industry for a number of years that think the same when they do come over, which is great.
And no doubt that you are delivering a great customer service, but what's, other than the kind of the returning guests, customers, and the money through the till, what other things do people say about the paint shed when they experience?
So I think it's problem solving. So one of the things we do really well is the right product for the right job. How do I get this colour that I previously had? Is it the same colour as what I had 10 years ago? Or just a bit of advice about it. I think we are very, very good once somebody's decided that they do need paint, but they just don't know what type of paint, what colour, how much. Yeah. So we're really good at that. And the people that make the paint are really good at getting people to think about painting. So through, whether it's Dulux with the Dulux dog, gets people thinking about it, and hopefully people then think locally, right, where would we go and buy that? And either through searching for Dulux locally or knowing us locally, we'll be able to convert that individual and into hopefully a repeat customer too.
I think you guys do a good job at getting people to think about paint as well, because, the paint shed, the shops, they're very obvious, so you drive, I'm thinking of the two that I drive past most often, but you always see them, do you know? Yeah. So,
I think certainly in Edinburgh, that's we do a pretty good job there. There's definitely work to be done in other locations, but yeah. My last question that was linked to all this, which was so it went from store location to customer experience, but actually it was retail heroes. Who would you say you look at from a retailing point of view and say, actually, they do a nice job? It might be a different industry. I'm putting you on the spot here. Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to sort of the digital side of it, actually. So I've always been a big fan, and it wasn't, I suppose, Edinburgh headquartered, but it probably is now. But I've always been a big fan of Mike Welsh's Black Circles business.
Oh, yeah.
So tyres. Yeah. I love the idea that ultimately you're searching by your location, you're getting a variety of solutions to your challenge, which is the tyre, and you're getting to compare against price and then convenience of actually getting it done. And I see, that is one of the things that we remain pretty passionate about with the Paint Shed for the future is, where can we take that brand, or what can we do in the industry that provides the same level of convenience to the paint industry, and that's where there's still an opportunity for hopefully us, where ultimately we want to get a pot of paint to somebody, whether locally or in London, wherever it is, within 24 hours, intact, at the best price, and that should be doable. And still to this day, that is not quite how the industry works. We're pretty close to it, but that's definitely where I'd like to take it and take the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so how then has it been since the sale for you? Your role has kind of changed, or at least the feeling behind it, going from, part owner to employee, I guess. What's that journey been like for you over the last year, 14 months or so?
Yeah, I'm having to keep an eye on my holidays. So I'm having to stay with an allowance now, which is actually a bit of a running joke with my team on a Friday afternoon. But anyway, that's where we are today. But no, I thankfully I had the experience and that's really important, I think, certainly for anybody within family businesses. I had best part of 8-9 years in proper, I'd call it proper corporate world of, you're at your desk at 8 a.m. and you were maybe get to go at 6:30. And it was, so you're very used to it. So it's quite easy to sort of pivot back into that space. And I think if you haven't experienced that, you would probably find it difficult. But and I think that's really important for anybody entering family businesses to understand the difference. But no, I'm pretty comfortable. I mean, the guys down south are, as I say, very, very similar to us. So they've got their own challenges. We've got ours. I spoke to my line report on the way here. We've got a board meeting up in Glasgow next week, and fair play to them. These guys are coming up as well. So it's not us travelling down to Gatwick all the time. So no, very comfortable, and hopefully I'll increase my holiday allowance.
Yeah. And how has it been having a business their size with the kind of, because they're at like 200 stores-ish and you're at 20. So, that's interesting then to be able to lean on 200 stores worth of experience. And so what has that allowed you in your future plans to continue to build and grow? Are there any pivotal, or key things you've been like, oh, that is super helpful?
Yeah. It just shows you, ultimately the guys are 200 stores, 200 million, we're 20 stores, 20 million. But so that sort of 10 times the scale. What it does show you is just, and a great thing for Scottish kind of entrepreneurs and businesses is look beyond the borders. The market is substantially bigger, beyond just Scotland. And I think where both businesses in the group are looking at that is, what's the size of that overall trade market, and how do we use both businesses to service that demand and appeal to it. And the second part of it is, we're starting to see quite a lot of non-UK based brands come into the UK as a result of that. So there's some really fascinating brands that are coming over from America, Scandinavia, that have made some pretty significant inroads into the UK paint market, which it's been surprising because historically, UK customers have always been, quite biased towards UK brands. So getting our heads around that, and as multi-brand retailers, we're brand agnostic. We don't, your experience is not, you're not going to get pushed towards a particular brand because it makes more money or whatever it is. It's about finding the right product for the right job. So it's fascinating to see that mindset also of who's got the best product out there, just like any other industry. And no brand can rest on its laurels that once upon a time it was the best brand. So so you won't see us saying one brand's better than the next. It's about where that quality sits within their price architecture and what somebody's willing to spend for that quality of product.
It's interesting what you say there about look outside of just out of Scotland. The market's big in England as well. We obviously had Fraser just on earlier on from Morph Costumes, and he was just talking similarly about looking outside of the UK to America. He says because the market's just it's that constant looking out and seeing what else is the bigger opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
really
and that shouldn't be restricted by and it can be done from here. I mean, we look at a lot of the UK paint brands are ultimately owned by foreign companies now, which isn't a bad thing, but it just shows you that those markets are probably bigger. In America, for one, there's digitally, America's always actually been behind Britain as well. So, it's Far East way ahead on the digital front, UK kind of coming in, and then America follows. So, our argument at the moment is, well, what could the group do in America as well? So, and Brewers are already doing a huge amount of wallpaper. Actually, we sell, the group sells a lot of wallpaper into America. I think just launched in France as well. So, absolutely, as long as there's the market and the customers are comfortable with the brands that are being sold, then sky's the limit.
What other things should we have been asking you that we haven't asked so far?
I was trying to think, if there's any really funny stories. I said to my wife before I left today, I said, problem is I can't think of too many hilarious stories. Is that
what did she say?
Is that how boring paint is? I mean, there's...
What did she say?
She said, no, it just depends if people would find these things funny or not. There's silly things
paint related jokes.
Silly things like, I remember do you remember in 2018 when there was like the beast from the east, the snow, and again, so in my sort of time at the business, we've only shut the stores twice, really.
Right.
And when you shut stores, it's quite a significant impact. But we shut the stores again in Beast from the East, and because nobody could get anywhere. Yeah. And eventually we're like, God, this is going on a bit. So I remember actually phoning Dad up. I said, right, we're going to go and open up a few of the stores and let's see if we can get the ball rolling here. So get your 4x4 ready and we'll go pick up some of the lads and see what we can do, because we're getting inquiries. Yeah. So... But, we should have just waited a couple of days, because we're traipsing up to, places like Stirling, and the whole yard's, 3-4 inches still. So we trundle the 4x4 through. But sure enough, there's this one lad kind of walking through the blizzards. We open up the shutters and the manager gets the tills going, gets the mixing machines on. And we're like, are you all right? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just looking for some paint, if that's okay. I said, well, you come to the right place. He said, nowhere's open. I said, that's ridiculous, isn't it? So he bought a litre for about £9. Yeah. And that's probably what we took that day. But no, I mean, other than, there's you don't need to look far. If you ever think paint is boring, you should Google kind of paint spillages. That's a good Google search to do.
It's one I've never actually done up until tonight.
And thankfully you won't hopefully see our branding over it. But there's some classics, motorway spills, and on the basis it's all water-based paint, it's all very fine. It'll wash away fine. But it always makes me chuckle when I'm driving along somewhere and the car in front of you, and you start to see. Then you see some paint on the road and you think, someone's had a paint leak. And then you should try it next time you're doing that. You see some paint on the road, just track it for, and I bet you're there for about 15, 20 minutes, because it ends up somewhere. And when we have some spillages and it happens, I mean, the last time I heard...
So can I just check?
Yeah.
Sorry, as in a pot of paint will fall off the lorry type thing?
Yeah.
Okay. And then someone runs through it? Right, okay, yeah, go on. Sorry.
And, and those tires go on and on and on.
Yeah.
But I mean, our version of that is if we've maybe loaded some paint on the back of a van and the van's taken off before he's secured it and it's started to spill. And with certain paints, it is our responsibility to make sure that there's a cleanup. And I remember dialing into something, going, all right, so we've had a bad one, right? Okay, so where's the spillage? And the guy goes, well, it was last seen just passing Leith. Right. So there are some downsides to the industry.
So, and do you feel a responsibility to go and tidy
Absolutely,
it all up? Then?
Yeah. I mean, you got to notify, especially if it's particularly oil-based paints. You got to notify councils and make sure that there's those hazardous materials are
And do you
dealt
get
with.
fined for that, or?
No, I mean, it's an accident. So as long as you're trying your best to clean up, and sometimes you have to pay for somebody to clean it. But yeah, it's definitely a hazard to be aware of.
So, okay, paint spillage.
Yeah, there you go. Get Google on that.
Told you there was no funny stories.
Brilliant. I love that.
We ask all our guests, what is your guiding principle in business?
Yeah. Stick in the old adage of kind of never giving up. And, what does that mean? It means, in any sport you can relate to that, I think. It's a kind of mental thing. But within a trading business, I think for us, there were several occasions along the journey, both pre me entering the business and post, where if the utopia for some people is build a business and sell a business and, disappear to some island, is the idea. Well, in reality, that's, pretty rare that actually happens. And in our situation, if we wanted to have sold the business, that could have been done a long, long time ago. But we were always very, on every occasion where that occurred, the decision was to stick in and push forward, because it wasn't right for the customers, the colleagues, and therefore the shareholders as well. And it wasn't until it was right for the customers, it was right for the colleagues and the shareholders, and probably in that order, to be honest, that it felt right. And therefore, looking back now, kind of 14 months in, I'm delighted that we, stuck in, and, Dad in particular, kind of pre me entering the business, sticking in through those hard years in the contracting business to get to a place where, everyone would be happy. And that's the difficulty, because we had seen situations where some people are happy in that transaction. Maybe it's the customers, maybe it's the colleagues, maybe it's the shareholders, but very rarely do you get it as a complete. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's the best you could have done. And one of the things that we did together on deal day was to make sure that the colleagues received an additional bonus on top of everything. So we made sure that we paid that out to every single individual, had been with the business after a certain length of service, and made sure that they felt that they were appreciated within that. And that was just right off the table. Some people may have not done that because it cost everybody, but that was something that we definitely wanted to do.
Nice. I love the story, and as I said, we spoke just off camera there as well. My wife spent a lot of money in the paint shed over the years as well. So I think she's been a big fan of your business. It's just lovely to hear how you've built it, and kind of the outcome that you got.
Yeah, no, it's it was a big moment, and it was a big moment that you never really believed you were, one, doing it, and secondly, it was going to be real until after the fact. But again, one of those moments where it's completely unknown, but you're pretty sure you know what you're doing. And thankfully for us, it's turned out as a positive.
Done it well.
Amazing. Michael, thank you so much for coming on
No, thank
and
you,
sharing
guys.
your story.
Hopefully that is helpful and interesting.
It was excellent.
Really great. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.